Um, One of the experiences that I've had with LGBTQ discrimination is in the locker room. I was heavily involved in high school sports. I was involved in the wrestling team and the football team in my high school, and there was a lot of like just toxic masculinity culture, where anything straying from like your like typical like strong straight man was pretty frowned upon. And just like that, it was really hard to kind of make friends, have those conversations. You couldn't talk openly about sexuality or anything that wasn't related to having something like straight intercourse or straight relationships.
How do you think being a member positively affects an individual's experience with love?
Um, After a person comes out, especially if they're a homosexual individual, either gay or lesbian, love turns from something that was once considered as a restraint to an opportunity that I think heterosexual people take for granted, because the love as you experience it is frowned upon by society. Homosexual love is controversial in a lot of places. So if you feel like you can't express how you fully feel about somebody without it being taken negatively, that has a lot of consequences and it can feel pretty restraining. Um, but after you come out and you're really open about your sexuality, it really helps you transform the way that you think about those romantic relationships from being some kind of restraint and some kind of prohibited act to being an act of love just like anything else. So it can be really easy to turn off that propaganda and just kind of turn your face away from it and choose to ignore it. If you want to take a more active approach, what I've kind of enjoyed the process of doing is actually looking into those groups, looking into the sources of that propaganda, and seeing their arguments. Trying to kind of get educated on the other side and kind of play devil's advocate, and you'll shortly realize like how hollow some of those roots are in their hatred, and it's really not you know a fundamental personal thing. It's just something that they've kind of developed either through tradition or some kind of religious basis. Uh, but ultimately, it helps to try to understand their side, just as you would hope that they would understand yours. I think that family is more about your support group, less about your bloodline, less about your relation. It's more about the people that you have in your corner, the people that you choose to be in your corner. You don't have to be there out of obligation. It's a two-way street where you want those people in your corner and you want them to be there as well. I mean, friends can be family. Your dog can be family. Anybody that you choose to have that close to you can be considered family. It doesn't have to be restricted by bloodline or by any type of relation. Love for me at its basic core is a practice of empathy and learning to understand those people fully and really trying to put somebody else's needs before your own. Not always, um, but it's important to recognize another person's needs and truly, genuinely care about them. And if you do, and you show a bit of empathy and try to understand where that person's coming from, regardless of the situation, um, that's what love is to me at its foundation. So there's this element in political science called populism, and it's where people take ideas that can be very complex and dense, and they turn it into a couple of buzzwords and try to sway popular groups to different sides. Uh, so the representation of the LGBTQ community in propaganda, in politics, in communities is incredibly important because ultimately it can quickly sway groups to thinking that LGBTQ stands for anything other than just love and attachment to people. I think it's been pretty evident in high schools that there has been a push for increased diversity and recognition of these LGBTQ groups. Unfortunately, past that, I don't see a lot of resources in smaller cities. When you move into larger metro areas like Chicago or New York, you see a lot of pride festivals, uh, things that tend to reach out to individuals of that nature. Um, but outside of that, in smaller cities like South Bend or anywhere in like the northern Indiana area, you don't really see a lot of outreach for you know, diverse LGBTQ groups. At its basic foundation, a community should be inclusive, supportive. Uh, they should love their neighbors and try to reach out to them and see what they need. It seems like a really fundamental thing, and it seems really cliche, but it's often what people get wrong. I've had the fortunate experience of coming out and being embraced by family members and by friends, but I know that that's not always the case. Unfortunately, that can result in the entire reshaping of your friend groups, of your dynamics in classrooms, in different cultures, in the workplace. Uh, if people are made uncomfortable by your sexual identity, then it makes for a pretty awkward conversation and awkward interactions.